Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, you can do this. Because this is Airwindows BezEQ3. So the deal with this thing is I keep trying to get the Bezier thing to work as an EQ. And it's not always the most straightforward thing because it's not an audio algorithm. It's a graphic design algorithm. But the theory there is it sort of does maximum curve smoothness through points. And there's an interesting property, which is if you have real filtering, what happens is the real filtering will control like slews between one position and another position. Using Bezier curves as a filter is not that way. Instead, what happens is it will do the smoothest possible corners on things, but the maximum slew for loud noises gets to be quite steep, because that's what a Bezier curve is. What it's going to do is smooth the edges and corners off of things, but if it needs to go from up here to down here very, very quickly, it will go that quickly the smoothest way possible. So what it sounds like, let me put this back, because I was just showing off ways of getting a sound. We can roll the highs off on these drums. And that gives you a darker sound. Or a brighter sound. But an interesting thing about that is when it goes for a darker sound, some of the body is still there poking through. And I think that can be interesting and useful because you get to retain some of the character of the sound. Also, because it's a Bezier filter, it wants to be sort of in lower frequencies. It doesn't really have a lot of sophistication up in the highs. So this is, in fact, a 96K recording, and still, this is as much as you can roll it off, and we can roll it off even lower. Notice that it has some funny additional behaviors, and this is because the Bezier filter lets through energy in an interesting way. I'm looking to use this for console X3 which is coming, because I'm able to get sounds more like the classic records I grew up with because of some of the quirks of this filter. But it's not like this is an audio well-behaved filter. You wouldn't use this for, say, scientific purposes or something. It's got qualities to it. Like this is a roll-off, but it sounds darker here. And then if we take it this far down, it's letting some of the highs back in. And this is us basically just boosting highs. By the same token, I've got my filter frequencies in there. Let's cut high mids. And if we sweep this around, it does some interesting things. By the same token, if we use that as a boost, it's got a funny quality, right? It sounds a bit like a room or something, but it's not. Okay, low mids in there. Cover a widely ranging set of frequencies there. So that's still just a 4-band EQ. It's just doing funny things that way. Or we can boast deep bass this way. But again, it only wants to use frequencies that are actually there, and it's doing weird things with them. Also, the places it's finding frequencies are affected by all of these controls. Well, not all of them. This is the bass. And so high mid doesn't do much, and highs should do nothing. And yet even then, it's full of tricks. And that's because this is one of my weird 4-band slide the frequencies around filter. It's kind of like SmoothEQ, where SmoothEQ2 was a tilting shelf filter because of the way the resonances worked. Well, in this, it's Bezier filters, so the resonances aren't anything normal. It's all very strange. But we can use it on some other things, like for instance, here's a guitar. And again, if it's flat, nothing weird's happening. So we could boost some low mids maybe. And you notice how they come out really loud, but you don't really hear a big tonal resonance on them. Or we can cut the highs. Or boost them. And cut the mids. And we'll sort of go into a funny behavior there, where it goes from a not especially bassy amp. This is the raw sound, but you can completely reinvent the sound in this. So it will go very aggressive. But the idea is anything that you do with it should sound like it was mic'd that way. You're not supposed to hear the frequencies as frequencies. You're supposed to hear the frequencies as part of the original sound. This one kind of fights the way that equalization and processing can try to break up the sound into bands and things. I was seeing people talking on a forum somewhere about how you'd have modern mix technologies, and they'd be like, how do we separate this out from that? Maybe don't. You might not want to separate things out from things. This is designed to be able to make composite sounds that have real character to them, and to be able to make stuff sound like you just mic'd it that way, rather than I applied a bunch of filters and so here's the highs and here's the lows and here you're hearing all of these frequencies happening. It's not supposed to sound that way. Here is a vocal.
Amounts to downright spiteful. Who's the fool who stands and dares to deny the only...
So it's a loud belty vocal, but there's a kind of resonant quality because of the way it's hitting the mic. And so we can do a number of things with that. For instance, I could pull back low mids a little bit to give it a bit of edge, and I can also add a little bit of treble, but hopefully not too much.
Amounts to downright spiteful. Who's the fool who stands and dares to deny the only rightful governor of your affairs? Know him now, there's no one fairer, shown by all he'll take away. Love's a trick and life's a terror, what then do you have to...
So I'm going to return to that for just long enough to fool with sweeping the high mid around. I'm going to leave... Actually, no, I'm going to drop the high just a tiny bit as well, maybe. Make it kick in a little bit lower.
Amounts to downright spiteful. Who's the fool who stands and dares to deny the only rightful governor of your affairs? Know him now, there's no one fairer, shown by all...
So that's the same rather raspy, nasting sound of vocal, but it sounds like it was just mic'd that way. And you can hear a little bit of the room echo in there, which is a tip that the raw sound of it is poking through past the resonances and things of the microphone.
Amounts to downright spiteful. Who's the fool who
And I added
stands
a little
and
bit of pop on
dares
that.
to deny the only rightful governor of your affairs?
The idea there is this should be a EQ where you can sweep it around and listen, but it's not really about sweeping around the frequencies, because the frequencies, it's like it's a switched set of capacitors. It's BezEQ filters. In fact, it's BezEQ filters in a stepped configuration rather than a continuous sweep configuration, because if you do the latter, you start getting the weird digital overtones just jumping out and rearing their heads. And this is the one that is doing as well as it can to not throw weird, funny overtones. So you sweep the levels of things against each other, and don't think of it in terms of this part has to be louder than this, or this frequency band needs to be cut in order to make the kick drum do the thing that we want or whatever. Instead, it's rough in the basic tone that way, and then explore guided by your ears, because it's going to really make big changes based on where it's set, how aggressively you're doing it. You'll see that I haven't done much in terms of extreme effects, and where the frequencies are set. And my last example here is something a little bit different, because what I've got here is literal rainfall. That's one of the things I was using as test tones for developing reverbs and things and densities, and you can hear it plainly enough like this. Set dry or set to neutral, there's no difference between that and dry, and that's because the EQ is configured in such a way where it's broken into frequencies, volume balanced, and then built back up into frequencies, built back up into the original again, meaning that if things are set flat, there is no effect. And this also means doing subtle controls with this EQ have a good way of seeming natural, because there are less overtones, and it doesn't have any like analog modeling, put a coat of paint over everything to make it sound as if it's coming off of a piece of hardware. No, this is not that kind. And I will demonstrate it now with the rainfall that we can fool around with. Now it's a little bigger and heavier, but more distant, or keep going. There's a switch. Bit of a sense of a high wind in there. And that's now being voiced in different ways. Rain, rain, go away. Now we've only got a delicate drizzle. And here's the original sound again. So there you have it. BezEQ3 is something that's a little different. And one difference that it has from BezEQ2 is BezEQ2 ran a bunch of varying latency, and you can't declare varying latency because if it's always going to be different, then there's no way to tell the DAW to constantly reassign its buffers and things. This one doesn't even bother with that, and it doesn't cause latency, and that's what causes the funny like notches and dips in the response that you hear. But it's able to make sounds like what you just heard, culminating in the sound of literal rain there, sounding realistic even though I'm doing aggressive weird things with it. It'll do the same for synth pads, it'll do the same for samples, it'll do the same for whatever. But the main gist of this one is it is trading off smoothness of response and controllability, because this is not as controllable as something like SmoothEQ2, for instance, for this naturalness of tone where no matter what you hear through it and no matter how aggressively you push it, it doesn't really sound like equalization is even being done. And that is a neat thing. So again, I'm looking to build this into a future version of console because this is the essence of what I'm trying to do with some of this stuff. And I'll get back to working on all of that. In the most recent bout of live streams, I did things like come up with a purist console 4 because I was asked for that. And that's using a new sine algorithm method that I'm doing, but that would be telling. I'll get back to that in another week. For now, again, I'm here every week, so what I'm hinting at, something like that will come out next week, and the week after, and the week after, as long as I'm here and able to keep working. And thanks to the Patreon, I'm able to work full-time. That's why I'm here every week. And I thank everybody who's helping me with that because it means the world to me. On that note, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.